Deepcool Gammaxx GT ARGB CPU fan. That didn't sound short at all, but the fan isn't short too. So what exactly is short here, if neither the name nor the fan is short? So where is this video going exactly? Is this video turning out to be long? Hey everyone, Mukul here. So I received this CPU cooler to do my scientific researches on, but some of you may already know what sort of scientist am I, right? So this fan is an upgraded version of its predecessor, of course. They upgraded the fan and made the lighting addressable RGB, and not only that, they also upgraded the heat pipes under the heatsink. The CPU of course comes with a 120mm RGB fan with the RPM range of 500 to 1650, and there are 4 heat pipes on the bottom. Where else would they be? The manual says that this CPU cooler should come with a 5 volts power SATA RGB controller for those motherboards which do not have a compatible header for the fan to run on. So make sure you get one in the box if your motherboard isn't compatible. And if you don't get one, you can knock the doors of Deepcool and ask them for one. You get a basic thermal paste packing inside the box with all kinds of screws and nuts and bolts and mounts. I have a strong suggestion here though. If you don't have any alternative thermal paste compound lying around, then for the time being you can put this one on the CPU. But if you are someone who games a lot or renders a lot, then buying a decent thermal paste will help the cooler perform even better than the standard paste provided with this or with most of the CPU coolers you go out and buy. In dimensions, the heatsink has a 6 inch of height, 3 inch of depth with the fan being 1 inch in its depth and an overall width of 5 inch. Oh. Maths. The overall build quality is fine. I mean, for the price, it's okay. It costs somewhere around 3000 rupees in India and somewhere around $35 US in US. I really like the finish on the top of the heatsink. It's aesthetically pleasing. The matte black is nice, and who doesn't like matte black finish on their things? So I won't say it's the best or most premium feeling CPU cooler out there, but it doesn't matter much in this price range, and if it performs well too, which we shall see ahead. It will support most of the sockets of Intel and AMD, including the latest Intel 10 Gens and the current Ryzen, so you don't need to worry about all that. But checking all these facts on the product page can never hurt too. If you are upgrading an old system with this fan, then be aware of the fact that if your CPU case is from Stone Age, like in this case, then you would have to disassemble the whole motherboard to place the backplate under it and then hook it. The backplate also have all socket namings finely demarcated on it, but the plate feels kind of flimsy, so make sure you are super careful and do not tighten the bolts too tight as you install this cooler. Even if you have a newer case, my suggestion will be to get the motherboard out anyway and screw the backplate carefully on the bottom so that you can feel the tension between the screws and your screwdriver, which I hope isn't screwing your driver. If you are using a motherboard with ARGB headers on them, then connecting and syncing it to your workstation lighting is going to be super easy. I tested this CPU cooler on my Asus TUF X570 motherboard just for the checking the RGB connections and everything was immediately synced. The 2 cables coming out of the fan and the heatsink can get hooked to this controller cable, which has these labels of different motherboard vendors on them. And then this fan cable which goes into the CPU fan header. If you want to put another fan for a push-pull configuration, you can do so too if your motherboard has a CPU optional fan header too, or just put it anywhere else just to power it on without any stats like RPM etc. visible on the BIOS. And if your motherboard doesn't come with a ARGB or a RGB header on it, then you would definitely need a converter for this. But if you already have a converter, then you do know what I am talking about, so there shouldn't be much problem for you to figure this out. So now after connecting everything and installing the motherboard, not in that particular series, you are ready to test your new CPU cooler and check if it performs any better than your stock CPU cooler or any of your previous CPU coolers, or did you just wasted a good chunk of your money. Well, in my case, I didn't want to fiddle with my primary system as I can't afford to disassemble it and lose the time on other projects I'm currently working on. So I went to my office where most of the systems are sitting idle due to everyone working from home. And because I couldn't take my camera and tripods there, I couldn't actually shoot the installation process. But Deepcool has made a very nice video on the same, which I will post in the description below for you to go through. I tested the CPU cooler performance on a Ryzen 2700X with a GTX 1050 and 16GB RAM on it with a MSI older generation motherboard. I also made sure to test the same bench with a Noctua U14S, as it's generally a good habit to compare a ton of CPU coolers together unless you are a pseudoscientist, which clearly I am not. Also, during all of these tests, I made sure to keep my side panel open and not closed. As compared to the AMD stock cooler, which was Wraith Prism in this case, there was a definite boost in performance of about 8.5% in ideal temperatures. But the Noctua was even 7.3% better than the Gammaxx. But for the Noctua, you have to pay twice the money and also lose all the RGB features you get with this cooler. And if you are buying a Noctua, you have to start loving the brownish theme instead, which many dislike except for utilitarian people like me. Did I say that word right? Utilitarian. And during the Prime 95 small FFTs test, the Gammaxx performed 8.3% better than the Wraith Prism, but as expected, the Noctuas performed about 7.6% better than the Gammaxx. So as expected, the cooler definitely performs better than the stock cooler most of you would get with your CPUs. The Wraith Prism is actually one of the better stock coolers, but I am pretty sure if you had an Intel CPU with its stock cooler to compare with, then the Gammaxx would have yielded even better results. The noise levels were quite moderate. I could not hear the fans much during the Prime 95 test, even though when it was in an open case. So inside a closed case, they would be hardly audible. And before I forget, the cooler looks good as the bright RGB lit fan right in the front looks good and is RGB and just lits. So yeah, it lits well. But my favorite part is the top part of the heatsink. The subtle lighting bleeding through the Deepcool logo is pleasing to the eyes. Also, if you ever see the cooler inside a case with this angle, this isn't bad too. I will be posting their purchase links in the description below. Hit a like and sub with the bell icon if the video helped you. Stay safe humans, otherwise what's the point of all this RGB? That's all for today, Mewbot out. So how's this new background, which is actually an old background, which is actually in some of my old videos?